So this is number 2 video in our series. If you missed the first one, it was how to prep your piece, which has gotten us to this place right now where we're going to be able to start painting our piece. So for this little washstand, I have chose my slate, which is a kind of a blue-gray, and I've got my trusty Klingon brush, which is the best brush on the planet, and it is damp. So with my paint products, you always want to use a damp brush, and by damp I mean you're going to wet your brush, give it a squeeze, and give it a shake. You don't want it dripping a lot of water. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice about my paint, when you open it up and take the lid off, you'll notice that there are resins sitting on the top, and it looks like water. Those are actually the paint resins because the resins don't weigh as much as the pigments. So it's really important that you take a stir stick before you start painting, even though sometimes it'll look like it's already mixed. And you're going to want to stir that from the bottom and just kind of work it in there really well. And the paint is, of course, very thick and creamy. And actually, some of the colors are thicker than others depending on the actual color because of the size of the pigments. So once you've got that all mixed up, you're going to wipe off your your stir stick. You are going to take your damp Klingon brush, and you're just going to grab a little bit of product because the paint goes really far. And you don't want to load your brush up, especially if you're using a Klingon, because it holds the perfect amount of paint. And then you're just going to start. So you pick a side and you start painting. So as you can see, it goes on very beautiful. So my plan for this little chest is, in addition to the slate, I'm also going to restain the top with my teak protective wood stain, which is also non-toxic. So one of the things that you'll notice when you're using my paint products is that there is no smell. So you can paint indoors when it's hot. You can paint indoors when it's cold. There's no need to have to paint outside in the garage even because there's absolutely no smells associated with actually any of the products. The other great thing is that it is, of course, water cleanup. And so no need for anything other than water to clean your brushes. And I use the same brush to apply my paint and my stain and my protective finish. So you really don't need multiple tools. You just have one really good, high quality Klingon brush, and you're good to go. That's all the tools you need for your painting arsenal. I usually do the inside of the doors as well. I don't do the inside of the cabinets, and that's a personal choice. But for me, I do like to have a finished look of the cabinet door, but not so much the inside of the cabinets. So we're gonna just put some paint on here really quick. So another question I get quite frequently about my paint is the safety of it all. And for a lot of people, paint safety probably isn't that important. I mean, we all kind of just go through life and don't really pay attention to things sometimes until it affects us in one way or another. But for me, safety with chemicals is very important. And there's some things that people don't realize about the painting industry. And number one is that it's not governed by anybody. Nobody regulates it. So it's kind of like cosmetics, that they have guidelines in place, but nobody enforces them. So one of the things that I'm most proud of with my paint is that, a lot of these paint lines will say no VOCs, non-toxic, and you can technically be non-VOC and still be toxic. Most paints will claim no VOCs, but they will still contain formaldehyde and acetone, heavy metals. Our paint exceeds the government safety standards for crib safety. So there's absolutely nothing in our paint that is harmful. And I'm extremely proud of that. And unfortunately, we are the exception to the rule, not the norm, for the painting industry. But aside from that, I think that you'll find that our paints are extremely durable. They're very user-friendly, super, super easy to use. You almost can't make a mistake. And because there's no wax in anything, if you do make a mistake, you can just paint right over it, even if it's got the finish on it already. So as you can see, I've got the first coat on the base. So I'm gonna paint the harp. And a lot of times I'll remove these, but I can actually paint this one in place because it's got a nice little separation on it. And I'm gonna paint this little lovely right here. So as you guys are watching, you could probably tell I'm kind of all over the place with my strokes. And that's the great thing about this paint is the brush stroke is kind of a characteristic of the chalk finish paints. So it adds to that antique look. So it really is not about doing long, even strokes. It is kind of going willy-nilly. I do have a technique when I'm doing a very large piece that I will lay my strokes all the way one direction, the first coat, and then the second coat I go in the opposite direction, and that gives the piece actually a little bit of a look of linen, and it's beautiful on the top of a dresser or at the top of a buffet. But when I'm doing little pieces like this, especially these ones that are really dated, because I'm going to be distressing it, it's going to look like it was from the 1800s. It's not really that important that you have long, even strokes. You really can just get the paint on there. And I have to be honest, I'm going to have a really hard time putting a second coat on this because if you see, the coverage is fantastic. And at this point, if I was to put another coat on, I really, really would be just wasting the paint because it doesn't need it. I mean, you can see these places that I've just painted, these drawer fronts, and they are completely covered perfectly. Okay, so another really great thing about the paint is the dry time. It dries really fast. So almost in all instances when you're painting a piece, when you start and get to the end of your piece where you started is already dry. So you can go ahead and start your second coat immediately as long as your paint's not dried on your brush. And if it is, you just want to stop and re-wet your brush. But that makes painting pieces very quick. So I get asked all the time how I can do, 2 or 3, even 4 pieces in a day. And the answer is the products because they are so user-friendly, like I said. So we're going to let this dry. It's got 1 coat on it, but I don't think we're going to need to do any more. And then if you want to join us in video number 3 in the series, I'm going to distress this piece to give it the authentic 1900s look. Thank you guys for joining me on this video series, and I would encourage you to follow us on social media. And also, if you would be interested in becoming a Pure Home Paint retail partner, please follow the link below and reach out to us. We'd love to have you on our team.